So in one of our other episodes, we talked about church tech tours. It's kind of a big trendy thing a lot of podcasts are doing, and just why you probably aren't going to learn a whole lot from it that would actually help you on a weekly basis. But it kind of made me think about something else. It seems like a lot of times when church techs need to learn something, they go look to another church tech.
Sure.
And it got us thinking. We were talking in the office the other day about why that might not be the best way to learn things. And here's why. The other day, Stuart, you were telling me about how you needed to fix your shower.
All right.
And
yeah, I know where this is going.
You could have just asked another buddy who maybe had fixed his shower one time.
Yeah.
And he probably would have just told you how it worked for him.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
He'd be like, well, when my shower broke, I had to do this one thing and it fixed it.
Sure.
And then you probably go to your shower and you'd try to do that exact same thing and it would probably still be broken.
Yeah, yeah. So I basically...
So instead, what would you do? Or
what
did you do?
Yeah, so in that scenario, that story, which just happened last weekend, the cold side of my shower, it's a whatever, I had to take it apart, and I had this piece in my hand. It's old. It's 30 or 40 years old or whatever. And I took it down to a big box store, and they're like, oh, you got to replace it. We don't have anything like that. Just replace the whole thing. You got to go to this one specialty shop in town that's only open, these weird hours and all that stuff. And I was like... and
that's their experience. That's all they know.
They're working for a big box store, a big box hardware store, and they're doing what they do.
Yeah.
I took it right next door to a little more specialized place, and I walked in. It's a big place, and I walked in and I went to the plumbing counter. Yes, there's a counter for every trade.
And I bet the guy sitting behind that counter knew what he was
Well,
talking
so
about.
I inserted my little joking around.
Sure.
So I walked up to the counter knowing that he's probably a professional.
Hopefully.
And I said, hey, how's it going? I'm just pretending to be a plumber this weekend, and I had a part in my hand. And of course, he was a good old boy. And he looks at it, he's like, oh, that's a Kohler. He knew right away what brand it was, first off. So that was one thing. He's like, oh, yeah, this is what you got to do. I'll tell you what you got to do right now.
Yeah, and he knew exactly.
He's like, if you can get that screw out of there, and you can pull that little rubber gasket off the back of this thing, you just stick the whole thing in some white vinegar. I bet you talk to your wife, she'll have some white vinegar for you. You leave it in there for 30 minutes, you pull it out, you flip that gasket around, stick it back on. It's going to cost you a whole $0 to get that thing fixed.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, I talked to a dude who probably didn't spend his, professional career just working in a big box store. He was probably a plumber or had done a few things. And talking to the right person made all the difference. I didn't have to rip anything out of my house. I didn't have to replace a whole bunch of stuff. I literally had to take a piece apart, stick it in something, put it back together, and stick it in. And guess what? He also told me one other thing. He goes, you're a smart guy. You got some common sense. Just look at it. And that's what I ended up doing.
That's what a lot of
church
techs need to hear. You're a smart guy. You got some common sense.
Yeah, that's all I did.
But I mean, in life, that's generally how we treat things. Like, it's pretty rare that you just go to your neighbor when your car needs to be fixed. Like, no, if your car needs to be fixed, you go to a mechanic, somebody who specializes in fixing cars.
Yes, absolutely.
Who has studied it their entire life. So if you're a church sound tech, why would you go to another church sound tech who's just another volunteer like you, who everything they've learned is probably just kind of off the cuff, anecdotal, like, yeah, I did this once and it worked, and so that's how I do it. Go talk to a professional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, a big warning sign to me, and I'm going to say this, even in a lot of big churches that you might look up to, a lot of those guys have only ever worked in the church tech world.
Yeah.
That's a big red flag to me. If somebody says, I have only ever worked as a church tech, then...
we need to throw them on a tour.
Yeah, like, the guy I want to talk to is the person who's had to produce 1,000 shows in 500 different venues with 100 different sound systems. Like, that's the person I want to talk to, because they're going to have so much practical knowledge.
Yeah.
Whereas church techs, a lot of times they're just watching church tech tours and just trading the same anecdotal thing. And that's a lot of times we'll be sitting in a church and somebody will say something to us and we'll challenge it. Like, do you really think that's true? Like, think about that.
Just think about it.
That doesn't make common sense.
A lot of times it just honestly comes down to common sense.